If the Singapore economy were a birthday cake, what flavours would it have? I think the classic Singapore cake will have to be a durian cake. Right?
Not kaya, pandan kaya maybe.
No, durian. A little bit spiky on the outside, but rich and creamy and so satisfying on the inside. Singapore is celebrating its 60 years of independence.
From kampung days to a thriving metropolis. Let's see how far we've come and where we are heading. Let's start with the questions. What are the key macroeconomic policies that have driven Singapore's economic growth in the last 60 years?
We did have a very prudent fiscal policy. We built our foreign reserves. We tried not to spend more than what we collected in terms of tax revenue. We also don't rely on debt to finance spending. We had a very open trade policy, so we welcome a lot of foreign direct investments. So if you look around, you have semiconductor plants, you have pharmaceuticals, you have oil refinery and petrochemical on Jurong Island itself. And I think beyond that, Singapore continued to invest very heavily both in physical infrastructure but also in the soft infrastructure. So that included basically the skills upgrading, the education, and also the continuous workforce training through life for the Singaporean workers. Which MRT station best describes Singapore and why? Well, to me, I think Raffles Place actually is kind of like the financial hub, is the beating heart of the Singapore economy. You come down anytime and you can see that it's really, really very busy. And I think it really shows that, the lifeline, the blood is pumping through the whole Singapore economy starts with finance.
What does the next decade look like for the Singapore equity market? Wow, we're looking at really long term now. As I shared earlier on, I think if you look at the Singapore market, despite the recent rally, valuations are still very reasonable. We're talking about valuations that are still close to below historical averages. So having said that, apart from the interesting valuation, we also look at what we call dividend yield. And Singapore market has always been one of the highest in the world in terms of dividend payout because of the fact that we have a very well-established group of core companies that have been around for the last 40, 50 years or so. And because of that, they are actually able to give out a lot more of their earnings as dividend. So on average, if you look at the STI stocks, on average, most companies within the STI should be giving you close to about 5% in terms of dividend yield. And so if you look at the last 20 years or so, on average, the STI gives you a return of 3%. And if you add in a historical yield about close to 4%, you're getting about close to 7% annually. But now going forward, you're talking about a market that will continue to give you 5% plus obviously whatever you make in the market. So I think the outlook for the next 10 years or so actually is still fairly positive and we're still quite constructive on the Singapore stock market. What are the main macroeconomic challenges and opportunity for Singapore in the next 10 years?
Well, I think the challenges are quite well known. We have an aging population. That means that our workforce is growing more silver hair by the day. That has certain implications for both consumption patterns, saving patterns, and also in terms of labour participation. So the other challenge really would be climate change, I think, because as a small island nation, we are susceptible to rising sea levels as well, and hence a lot of the investments that have to go into to fight this rising sea levels, so such as the 100 billion that is going to be spent over the next 100 years to fight rising sea levels. I think the third one really is the current economic and geopolitical climate. There is a lot of contestation among the major powers that turns into trade conflicts and tariff levels that everyone's talking about. And of course, there's all this jostling for, whose side are you going to take, and that makes it very, very difficult, for a lot of small open economies to stay neutral. But I think Singapore is quite trying to navigate that challenge quite well. Imagine a Singapore at 60 investment board game. What should the winning strategy be? That's an easy one. Bet on Singapore.
Yeah, we've said this numerous times. I think Singapore's safe haven status and all the other encompassing factors have always been mentioned, but a bit underappreciated until recently, whereby we saw the STI actually finally crossing the historical high of 4,000. We are actually now at a new phase of growth, and I think that while it is at 4,000, and we do get a lot of questions asking us, should we still continue to stay invested in the Singapore market? do bear in mind that this whole safe haven status, the good governance and a very well developed infrastructures and some of the key drivers that will actually ensure that the next 10 years the Singapore market should still be a very comfortable and I think stable market that you can actually continue to invest in. How has the Sing dollar evolved since independence in 1965? What's your outlook on SGD for the next 10 years?
Well, when Singapore gained its independence in 1965, actually we were still sharing a common currency with Malaysia and Brunei called the Malayan dollar. It was only until 1967 when these three countries actually started issuing their own national currency. And it was only after the collapse of the Bretton Woods that the Monetary Authority of Singapore was actually established. And even after that, we kind of like experimented with a few fixed pegs, and then we only really moved to the current monetary policy tool, which is a trade-weighted exchange rate much later. But if you just take a look back around 2000 to today, the trade-weighted Singapore dollar actually has appreciated more than 40%. Okay, so a lot of that is in line with, of course, the economic growth, but also a lot of the very established and solid macro fundamentals that we have highlighted earlier.
That's all we have for you for this episode.
Happy birthday, Singapore!